Welcome to episode 69 of the Eat for Endurance podcast. My name is Claire Shorenstein, and I'm a board-certified sports dietitian and runner based in Santa Cruz, California. I provide virtual nutrition services to teenage and adult athletes of all abilities, and I host this podcast to demonstrate that there is no one-size-fits-all nutrition approach towards optimal health and performance. Today's topic is performance nutrition for ultrarunners and features registered dietitian and fellow ultrarunner Julie Shobe. Julie and I go in depth in this episode, covering all the building blocks to creating a successful race nutrition plan. We discuss some of the biggest nutrition mistakes we see ultrarunners make, carb and protein goals, and how to train the gut to reach these recommended amounts per hour, how to identify fluid and sodium targets, how to incorporate caffeine into your fueling plan based on race distance, how to prevent GI issues on long training runs and on race day, and so much more. We also occasionally stop to compare notes and approaches as sports dietitians, which is often one of my favorite parts about having my colleagues on the show. There are a lot of recommendations in here that can be used more broadly for endurance folks, but this one really is for all my ultra runners out there. I hope you enjoy it. So without further ado, please enjoy my chat all about ultra running performance nutrition with fellow dietitian Julie Shobe. Julie, welcome to the Eat for Endurance podcast. How's everything going today?
Good. Thank you so much for having me on, Claire.
Yeah, so we know you're a sports dietitian, you're a trail and ultra runner, you're a mom. Tell us all about yourself.
Oh, thanks. Yes. So, I've been a registered dietitian for, I think, coming on 13, almost 14 years now. I worked actually as a clinical dietitian for like over a decade, actually specializing in diabetes education for a long time. Had some burnout and didn't want to work in the clinical setting anymore. So a couple of years ago, I quit that job, and I feel like I had a bit of a career midlife crisis, as much as you could have one in your mid 30s. But yeah, so my husband and I have been ultra runners for almost a decade, and I just had this like epiphany. One time we were at a race together with some friends, and we had 11 friends racing this, the Rut mountain runs. I don't know if you're familiar with that run. Those races are super fun. So we had 11 friends there that weekend, and 6 out of the 11 really struggled with their fueling, and 4 out of those 6 DNF'd because of their fueling. And the other 2 are like super bomb athletes that just like didn't get to race as fast as they could have because they were like projectile vomiting on the side of the trail. So it gave me this idea of, and then I sat down with all of them, got on a Zoom call with them, and I was like, hey, can I pick your brain about like how you fueled for your race during the Rut? And just saw a couple overarching themes amongst all of their stories, and realized that not everyone has a brain of a dietitian, and it doesn't make sense to them why certain things might happen because of not fueling. Like a lot of times the answer to them was blaming the food rather than blaming the lack of food. So it just gave me an idea, and it was a learning curve for me too, right? Like, because a lot of the stuff that I knew was anecdotal, and did some research on what information is out there for ultra running, and then launched my private practice and have helped quite a few ultra runners over the almost 2 years now, and it's been really fun. So that's my kind of professional background. I have two daughters, a 5-year-old, and I have a hard time admitting it, but my youngest is turning 1 a week from Thursday.
Oh, happy birthday.
Yeah. Lots of people think this is really weird, but I would perpetually have like a 0 to 12-month-old. Like if I know, right?
As a mom of 2, I'm like, no.
I love like the first year so much. Like I love breastfeeding. I love that they are like, they can't talk back. Like I just love so many things. So it's like very sad to me to admit that she's turning 1 next week. But yeah, I live in Montana with my husband, and we just like to get outdoors and hike and run and do all the fun things. So yeah.
That's awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that all with us. So today's topic is, of course, one that we both love, ultra running nutrition. And I've covered a lot of topics, but somehow, and actually I don't know how this even happened, somehow ultra running like nutrition specifically as an episode hasn't happened yet. So when I was like, I saw you pop up in my feed and I didn't really know about you. And I was like, oh my God, obviously I need to have you on the show to talk about this. So I'm really
Yay.
so I'm really excited that, we're focused on this today. Now, of course, my audience, I have many ultra runners in the audience, so I probably don't need to share this, but just in case it's, of course, anything longer than 26.2, I would say, just for the sake of our discussion, we can perhaps bring more attention to 50 miles and up because, of course, the longer you go, the more likely things will go sideways if you don't have your nutrition plan dialed in. I think anyone can kind of get through a 50K if they have to. Not to say we don't need a specific nutrition plan for that. Of course we do. But yeah, it's really often the 50 milers, 100Ks, 100 milers, 200 milers. Those are the things that really, people, we'll bring back that projectile vomit example there. things go south. So yeah, I thought we would just kick things off by talking about, from what you've seen so far with your clientele, and in your own experiences, what are the biggest nutrition mistakes that you see your ultra clients making when it comes to performance nutrition? I definitely have my own list, but I want to compare notes. So yeah, why don't you kick things off with that?
Yeah, when it comes to actual fueling while you're running, the biggest mistakes that I see people make are just overall not eating enough food, waiting too long to start fueling, so they get really far behind on calories, and then also their digestive tract isn't quite ready for the food as well. And so kind of a lack thereof training the gut. I guess those two kind of go hand in hand. Hydration and then paying attention to sodium would be a third big mistake, and one that I personally have made in the past. And then those would be, I guess, the three kind of top ones that I would find that people tend to make mistakes with.
Yeah. And I had all those ones on my list. Awesome. And, why don't we address the different categories of building a successful ultra nutrition plan, starting with carbs, because, carbs are obviously so important. So let's kick things off there. So, maybe we can just spend a moment. Why are carbs so critical to ultra performance for all runners, regardless of how fast you are going? Because, of course, we talk about like marathon running, half marathon, and then we talk about ultras. And there's this thought, okay, well, we're going slower, there are hiking parts, but obviously carbs are still important. So maybe you can just spend a little time talking about that.
Yeah, carbs are your body and your brain's main source of energy and preferred source of energy when you're active. And then, of course, we have this line of thinking of, low carb, high fat, which people are wanting to somehow alter their metabolism so they're burning more fat for energy and they can go for longer with less food. There are definitely people out there doing that. It's not a method of nutrition that I tend to and I don't encourage, not tend to, I don't encourage it. So let's just be clear here. So, but it's, but what I like to talk about with people is like your body at these lower intensities, is burning fat for energy. Like you don't have to like alter your metabolism or do anything to it. And in fact, eating more carbs is actually going to help that metabolic process of burning fat while you're out there. So, because that is how the whole process starts. So is with carbohydrate. So that also, to kind of even back up from your point of carbs, why we focus on carbs and even over calories, right? So like there's this recommendation too to eat what I think people tend to say 200 to 400 calories per hour. And I don't tend to even go with that recommendation, because if you do that, then you might be getting higher protein or fat levels, which then could, not be providing the best source of energy for your body to be breaking down and using right then and there, but it also can cause some GI problems. So with too high fat content. So really boiling it down to like the specific of carbohydrate and looking at that particular macronutrient. And then of course there's a range that I personally recommend for ultra running, and that's 40 to 90. And I think a lot of people do, but there's obviously variations and recommendations, but that's the range that I typically encourage people to get every hour while they're out there running. And that range can fluctuate. Like just today with my question and answer Zoom call that I do with my clients, one person said, well, what if there's like an hour where my intensity is really low and I've been at an aid station for a while and I'm maybe just walking more of that one? Well, sure enough, there's two ways that you could look at it. Is like, one, yeah, sure, if you feel that 40 grams of carb that hour is going to be sufficient for your energy expenditure, by all means, go for it. However, also, if you're kind of in the hole at this point in time, you might want to use that hour to eat extra and get yourself, built back up in that glycogen storage and move forward from there. Or give yourself even more extra, like maybe you're not behind, but you just want to like be ahead on fueling, which what a concept for ultra marathons.
Oh yeah, of course. They're like, I'm barely moving. Why would I need to eat more? Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. And I think, we see those guidelines of like at least, the 60 to 90, gram range. And I like that you're kind of starting with the 40 gram to give a little bit more flexibility. And I think I've seen you, and this will kind of segue into my next question about how you, work with clients to increase carb intake on the run. But, that's that whole concept of training the gut, right? Like starting a little bit lower and kind of gradually working up from there. I'm the same way. I definitely don't recommend calories per hour. I'm really focusing on the actual macronutrient, getting that in and focusing on where things are coming from. But yeah, maybe you can kind of just break it down. If someone were, say, not doing a great job of getting carbs in, how they can start, maybe it is at that lower amount and gradually kind of increase.
Yeah. So one of the first steps that I encourage clients that I work with to do is to find out their baseline of how much they are actually fueling with, because some people just don't know, right?
Yeah.
We wing it. So, and what I typically do is a baseline of like a 2 or 3 hour run, just because those are distances that ultra runners typically do on a regular basis. So it's not like hard to go do a 2 or 3 hour run for an ultra runner. Speaking to ultra runners. So
yes.
Yeah, I realize that if you're not an ultra runner listening to this, you're like, what the heck? 2 to 3 hours long is a long way. Yeah. It's all relative. So they go out for a 2 to 3 hour run. I don't want you to change anything. I want you to fuel exactly like how you've been fueling, but this time pay attention to it. So check the wrappers and tell me how many grams of carbs you ate during that 2 or 3 hour run, how much protein was in that 2 or 3 hour run, how much sodium, and how much overall fluid. And is this a good indicator to you as to how you would typically fuel? If it is, then we move on from there and we slowly increase. So you've probably found this too, Claire. Some people can tolerate food super well and can jump up very fast. And there's other people with more sensitive stomachs where it's like, okay, this might take some time, but we're just going to increase like 5 or 10 grams per hour at a time, and then just build slowly from there. But it's not uncommon for people to come to me in like the 10 to 20 grams per hour range.
Ooh, wow. That's low. Yeah. I've seen that too. I've had people who are like doing nothing, but sometimes I'm getting people who are more in the like 30 to 40 gram, and we're just like, hey, can we like bump you up like into that 60 to 90 place? The other category I'd say, like you, and we're gonna get more into this later when we talk about GI issues, which of course are like such the big thing with ultras. But you mentioned like the person who has the more sensitive stomach and the person who can eat more food. But there's like okay, well, everything's great in training, but then when you're actually like the people who are truly trying to race, like if you get someone who, whether they're at more elite level or they're like a very competitive recreational runner and they want to like just race as hard as they can, that's where like the tolerance goes, again, like out the window. So we'll get into that a little bit later, but that's the other thing that becomes really tricky, I think, because like training, again, at that lower intensity, we can get a little bit more in. But yeah, anyways, we'll put a pin in that for a second. I'm just going off track for myself here, but maybe we can.
I'm actually
sorry, go ahead.
I'm actually interested in what your methods are, because I would love to hear what you do for clients like that. Because I have a few things that I work with for people for helping tolerate food at higher intensities. So I'm excited to talk about that with you.
Awesome. So there are like a billion products on the market, as we both know. And I think I actually saw one of your posts, was it yesterday or recently, where you like, it was the different proteins, you were like putting different wrappers. And I thought to myself, of course she has all those things in her kitchen because she's a dietitian. You probably have like every product known to mankind like lying around. And yet somehow, I don't know about you. Sorry, I keep digressing here. I'm having one of these podcast days. But I don't know about you, but still clients will come to me and mention a product that I've never heard of. And I'm like, wait, what? Where did this come from? Yes, you're nodding.
1,000%.
And I'm like, wait, how is it possible that I'm like hearing of like 10 new products today? And they just keep coming. Anyways, there are so many products, that's my point. And whether it's like real food or drinks or chews, gels, whatever, what are your some favorite ways to get carbs in, either for yourself or that you've seen amongst your clients? And how do these change with different distances?
Ooh, yeah. So I'll just go ahead and talk about myself because that's what's easiest.
Yeah.
I love Awesome Sauce. It's a Spring Energy product that's like 45
Same.
grams in carb for, so awesome. Awesome. They put it right there in the
Yep, it
name.
is. They really did.
Yeah. So I really like that. And I like them as a company. Hammer Nutrition has Perpetuum, which, I'm not a huge fan of their other products, but I do really like Perpetuum, and that's just personal preference. It's I think they refer to it as like an endurance fuel, and it's got like 50 grams, right around 50 grams of carb per serving, and then 7 grams of protein, and actually like a little bit of fat. I think it's like 2 or 3 grams of fat. I just like the nutrition profile; like it sits really well for me. And I like getting protein in a liquid form as well. I also really like smoothie packs. So Nuka or however you say the brand, I don't know, but they used to have like a chocolate banana one, and I think they discontinued it. I've been searching for it, which made me really sad because it was a great product, but I recently found this Fuel for Fire smoothie packs. I found them on Amazon and have enjoyed those as well. So I like the smoothies. I really like Honey Stinger Energy Chews and Scratch Energy Chews. I can just if I'm feeling like I'm getting behind, I can just literally throw a pack of Honey Stingers down, an entire pack in 20 to 30 minutes 1 to 2 minutes, and then swish it with my mouth with just plain water, and I'm good to go. I like those a lot. And I'm a huge fan of just some Cliff products as well. So I like their nut butter, granola type bars, or I think Z bars are Cliff too. So I like those.
Yeah.
On the more salty end of things, I'm a potato chip fan. That's kind of my main salty food. Pretzels are a little bit too dry for my liking, but occasionally I'll go for them. But yeah, a good, just a plain ruffle potato chip is pretty awesome. And then I love just fresh fruit. So oranges or watermelon. I don't tend to like bananas when I'm running, or grapes. So those are kind of hopefully that gave you a variety of foods that I like.
No, that's awesome. And, I saw those smoothie packs. I'm really curious about that. I actually have never tried Perpetuum myself, although I've seen that product. And I think I've never tried drinking something with protein in it during, although I know it's definitely a strategy, obviously, whether it's the scratch recovery or tailwind recovery or something like Perpetuum or whatnot. Those are all things I haven't tried on myself yet, but that's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Do you find that over different distances, you're reaching for different types of products in terms of whether it's getting your carbs or something else in? Because a lot of the things you listed obviously are mixed foods. Or do you tend to kind of reach for the same things?
Yeah, I think I try and go for more of a variety the longer I'm going. So there's a list of 5 things that I tend to tell people to try and incorporate. It's sweet, salty, savory, liquid and fresh foods. And so the longer I'm going for, the more variety I want. The shorter I'm going for, I can typically stick more with like the sweet type foods because I can tolerate those, but I know I will get sick and tired of that after a while.
I have a kind of stupid question. What's the difference between savory and salty?
Yeah, no, it's not stupid. I guess I view salty as being more of like the potato chip pretzels.
Okay.
And then savory more like being a quesadilla or pizza or
okay.
bacon.
Got it.
Something maybe with more fat in it.
Got it. Okay. That makes more sense. All right.
No,
cool.
that's a good question, and I should probably define that better when I'm explaining that theory.
No, I like it. That's a very nice way to kind of concisely think about like, what are you getting in? Are you hitting those 5 things? That's a good one. What are your thoughts on kind of liquid versus solid carbohydrates, especially when it comes to keeping the gut happy? And part of the reason this is a little bit on my mind because the podcast episode I released, was it last week? Yeah, I think it was last week, was with Dylan Bowman. He's about to run, was it Hard Rock this week? And he predominantly does liquid calories, and it was just kind of got me thinking about that. And I was just curious if you had any thoughts.
Oh yeah, I'm pro both. And I encourage people to use both. If somebody can tolerate just liquid calories for that amount of time, and Dylan is obviously, I don't know him personally, I just know him from his name and his fame. But and he's a professional athlete, so like if that's what he can tolerate, then that's great. And he's running a lot faster than the high majority of the rest of us, right? So, which is why he is where he is at. But I would probably encourage somebody not to just mainly have liquid nutrition as their main source of fueling. I would encourage maybe more of like a 50-50 approach, which is, I've never thought about it in percentages now that that just came out of my mouth, but it's like if I were to probably look at a lot of the fuel plans that I've put together for my own self or that I encourage for my clients, is probably right around there.
Yeah. The way I guess I think about it too is like you look at products, whether it's Scratch or Tailwind or whatever it is, right? And some of them are high carbohydrate, like let's say Tailwind, for instance, like you're doing 2 scoops and when you're a soft flask or something, that's 50 grams of carbohydrate. And, so, but then we think about, okay, well, we still need to hit fluid goals and sodium goals. And and this is where we're kind of veering away from carbs a little bit, but I think it's particularly in the context of hitting sodium goals. And that's where it becomes tricky because like you want to keep things often as simple as possible for athletes, especially the fueling plan. And I'd love to kind of talk about this whole idea of like simplicity and how can we like streamline things and have a plan while still creating like a sense of flexibility, because obviously you have to be able to problem solve on the day and really just be able to change things up as needed. But personally, like when I'm thinking about carbohydrates and where they're coming from, it's like that sodium piece that always comes in, and like how can we not make it so complicated where we're like, oh well, okay, fine, you're only getting 25 grams from your Tailwind, and let's make sure you add these salt pills, and then you have all these like things going on. Do you know what I mean? I'm curious how you handle, I guess that's where maybe I'm getting at with like liquid calories are really handy, and maybe at certain points of a race you're going for them and other points you're not as much, right? So kind of, that's kind of where I'm coming from. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, with the simplicity piece, it is like an internal battle that I have with myself almost like on a regular basis, because I'm like, oh man, like I am like, if you talk to me about day-to-day nutrition, I am not somebody that's going to encourage macro counting or calorie counting or anything like that. But when it comes to fueling for race day and long runs, then I do see a really big benefit to getting more specific on that. And that can be really overwhelming to people. Yeah. To your point. So, and if they are brave enough to admit that to me, which I do have clients that are like, I'm really overwhelmed, I don't know what to do, then I just say, okay, we are just going to focus on carbs and we are just going to focus on fluid. And hopefully they're telling me this at some point in time of their training. And then we get used to those two things. And then we can add the additional layers in of the sodium. And for me, I encourage like small amounts of protein frequently throughout the race as well. So that would be the kind of like the advanced layering of the approach that I try and take with that. But I agree, it can get so overwhelming and so tricky. I don't know, have a really great answer to that other than I agree with you.
Hey everyone, sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to share a recent review that I got from Run for Long on Apple Podcasts. Run for Long says, shows are always well done, with interesting guests and a lot of nutrition knowledge. I hope you can continue to share these podcasts. Thank you so much for that review, and you guys can all help me continue the show by hitting that subscribe button wherever you enjoy your podcast. You can rate and review it, you can share it with your friends, and if you have a few bucks to spare, you can financially support the show and the many, many, many hours of work I put into it, and of course my own money as well to host it, by heading on over to Patreon, which I'll link to in the show notes. I also have an Amazon storefront where you can support me in your regular shopping. And lastly, I am working on setting up a page on YouTube, so definitely go check that out if you like getting your podcast content over there. Thank you so much. Let's get back to my chat with Julie.
Yeah, no, and it's top of mind right now because I have a client who's I've been working with like GI issues, definitely the projectile vomiting, all that kind of stuff. Who's doing a bunch of 100-milers. He's doing Bigfoot 200, and one of the things I was trying to figure out is like, and not to get too far sidetracked here with sodium, and maybe we'll talk about this in a bit when we talk about sodium, but like the different tests out there, and we were trying to hit like a specific target, but like we decided we didn't want to do like more of a tailwind product because we needed a little bit more sodium and we could get calories elsewhere. But then the scratch, hyperhydration was a little too high. So I'm like, okay, like let's put like, you're nodding your head, you get it. Like, okay, so we're going to put like 1 3/4 of, I'm like, oh my God, his crew is going to kill me. And we're going to put 1/4 of this and this. And I'm like, I'm just going to try to like simplify this as much because of course you have, again, coming back to where I started with the whole carb umbrella, there's so many types of products. We have products that are very, very carb heavy. We have products that have zero carbs. We have products that are, tons of sodium and a little bit of carbs. So it's like, we're trying as dietitians here in creating these fueling plans, like tick all these boxes and figure out what's going on in terms of tolerance and all that. And of course, I don't mean to be giving the sense to my listeners that this is like an impossible problem. Of course it's not, but it is like putting together a very hard jigsaw puzzle and we're like playing detective, figuring this all out. So, so this is part like question, part like venting together. This was like on my mind yesterday when I was just like sitting there writing a fueling plan, being like, oh my God, how do I handle this? And all these different things. So I know you get it. So I was just going to take a moment to talk about it.
It's like I have to remind myself, because one thing that I say to my clients pretty frequently is nutrition is not an exact science.
Yes.
And then it's like, but then I get like you're saying, then I get caught up in this, like, but then we're like just shy of like 300 milligrams of sodium for this section of the trail. Like, oh my gosh, that's probably not going to be that big of a deal. So it's,
yeah, no, I hear you. Anything else on carbs before we kind of move on to protein? I know, again, there's a lot of overlap with all this, but I'm kind of moving from one macro to the next, and we'll kind of see how that goes.
It. Yeah. No, I think I'm happy with our conversation. If you are.
Awesome. Great. So moving on to protein, I think this is where sometimes people get a little more confused, in terms of how much protein they need, how often, especially because it's one of those things that it can be a little bit harder to tolerate, especially if you are trying to push the intensity. But with longer distance, as we've already discussed, it is important to include. So can you speak about protein requirements in ultramarathons and why we need protein in longer training runs and events?
Yeah, so the recommendation that I go off of is 5 to 10 grams of protein per hour. And I don't know if you've read this. I read this and I need to dig it up in one research article. There's a research article that actually suggested 0.25 grams of protein per kilogram body weight per hour.
Yes. I saw that and Dude, I don't know if it was that exact number. It probably was. All I know is I think it was not that long ago. I calculated out for a client. I'm like, this is effing ridiculous. Like, no one's
Oh,
going to have like 20 something grams an hour, like whatever it was.
exactly. Yes.
Like, I'm like, no.
This is where research does not become helpful.
Like no one's going to do that. I couldn't do that. I'm not going to tell someone to do that.
Thank you so much. I've never actually talked to another dietitian about that. I've brought it up to clients and I'm like, I scoff at it with them and we laugh about how ridiculous it is. But I'm so glad that you feel the same way.
You're good. You're good.
Like, oh my gosh, that whoever did this research is not an ultra runner. I don't think they are.
No.
So,
no.
So yes, 5 to 10 grams of protein is what I recommend. And most of the time it's just like get in that 5 or around that 5. If you're slightly under, great. If you're slightly over, awesome. Like it doesn't. So, okay. So we're on the same page with that. Great. So what I've noticed actually with clients is, and this is anecdotal, but it's personal experience and it's also an overarching, theme that I've seen within my clients as well is that when they do start to layer in that protein, and I recommend actually practicing with that protein on shorter runs. So even like 60-minute or 2-hour runs, just to train the gut to get that, your stomach and your digestive tract used to processing protein while you're running. I find that it actually helps people tolerate food for a longer period of time. 60 grams or 90 grams of carbohydrate per hour is, let's face it, it's a lot of food every hour on that, like hours on end. You know, some ultras are 24, 48 plus hours, and that's a long, long time to be hammering Pop-Tarts and awesome sauce and energy chews and electrolyte beverages. So your body and I always just say it makes your stomach happier, like just to give it a little bit more of a balance. So, yeah, that's one thing that I've noticed. And then here, I'll talk to the benefits of it if you're okay with that, Claire. I don't know if this is like
totally
exactly like what you were asking, but
I've also
noticed I've also noticed within my clients that recovery goes a lot better. Their muscles feel a lot happier within the race and post-run. Like their soreness is improved and they feel ready for their next workout more so than they would before they were adding that protein in during their runs, which I think is a really, really cool benefit to adding protein in. And then the other thing that I always say to people is, if you're sitting on the couch for 6 hours, your body still has a need for protein. So if you're running for 6 hours in the mountains, then your body definitely still has a need for protein. So that's just like another reason why we want to try and incorporate it in there. But yeah, as for products go, I've already mentioned a couple of them, like recovery beverages is or the Perpetuum. So Tailwind has a recovery product, Scratch has a recovery, and they have a vegan recovery that doesn't have dairy in it for people that are worried about the dairy upsetting their stomach or just like longevity of it lasting on the trail. And then let's see, Gnarly has a recovery product and a vegan one that I've had a client really enjoy. I'm actually not in love with like the nutrition panel of that one, but I've had a client that liked it. And then I just learned about, you were just talking about how new products, like we just learned about these new products.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you're familiar with it. It was a new one to me. It's, I hope I don't butcher how you say it. Hyle, Hyle, with like a line above it. I guess it used to be called
Okay, so a client actually just told me about that product, but I wasn't familiar with it either. So I literally just also heard of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, not familiar with it.
So, yeah, I just did a different podcast recording, and it was one of the hosts last night that told me about it. And then I was looking it up, and I was like, this product actually looks pretty awesome. So they have a hydration and a recovery product that the ingredients, like there's no artificial sweeteners or sugar alcohols in there, like sometimes these products will have. So it's definitely a product that I want to actually look into and try. So those I think are the main ones that I just listed off for liquid protein. And And then I would avoid protein powder during an ultra for sure. Mainly
why is that?
The whole goal of, well, the goal of protein powders, right, is protein and like high protein, low carb. And so
like actual, okay. Like not like sorry, I thought you meant like any kind of powdered protein. You mean like actual protein powder that you would, high protein, low carb. Okay, got it. Not like a Tailwind recovery or that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Okay.
So that's a conversation I have with people is like, actually, hey, these recovery beverages are going to be much better of a choice than these protein powders are, because they actually have carb in them. And these protein powders, I have had people come to me and they've used like Orgain or Vega and stuff like that, where those are great protein powders, but they do have artificial sweeteners in them to lower their carb amount, which isn't beneficial in ultra running. So and then also to be mindful of just like protein bars as well. So like Quest is one that comes to my mind, where it wouldn't be a brand that I would encourage somebody to eat while they're out on the trail. But like a Cliff or a Pro Bar or would be more of a brand where I would tend to encourage people to go towards. But even those, you got to be careful with fiber content in there, and just being mindful of that kind of stuff. But that's why I also like those smoothies. So those Fuel for Fire smoothies also have 10 grams of protein in them. So just eating one of those over the course of 2 hours is something that I would recommend trying.
What's the protein from? Do you know?
I actually have one on the floor right behind me.
I love it. It's on the floor.
I'm racing Beaverhead this weekend, and
fun.
I currently have all my stuff laid out on the floor.
Nice.
So I think it is whey. So it's whey protein. But I've tried it on some long runs and hikes, and it goes down just fine for me. So I'm excited to try it.
At what hour point, what duration of a run? Let's forget for a second. Let's say, because often we're thinking about in the context of you're training for X race, right? But let's just say you're not training for anything. You're just enjoying running. And at what point what duration would you say, hey, let's start including protein? Is it even for a 2 hour? Are you saying anything over 3 or 4 hours, 5 hours? At what point are you hey, you really need to start including this?
So I guess my question would be, even if you're running for fun, what are you running for? So are you running, is your ultimate goal the longest adventure that you want to go on, this summer? So I had this conversation with a friend recently. She's like, I'm not an ultra runner, but she has this, we live near Glacier National Park, and she wants to do this 40+ mile hike, fast pack hike run through through Glacier. And I was like, well, so, that's ultra distance. And this is a distance of which you are going to want to be able to tolerate protein on that run, on that adventure. And so if somebody has, whether it's a race or not, an adventure that they want to go out and do, or just be prepared to go out and do an adventure that's longer than 6 hours. That's the range that's the hour marking that I typically recommend. So if you're planning on doing adventures that are going to be 6 hours or longer, then I would encourage starting to practice with some protein. If you are somebody that's really sensitive, then I would start with just 2 to 5 grams of protein with maybe 40-ish grams of carbohydrate on a 1 hour run, and get used to that, and then grow from there. Of course, grow your carb, and then your protein would grow by 5-ish grams of protein every hour that you're out there.
Yeah.
Does that answer suffice?
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Anything else about protein that you want to say? I think we covered it mostly.
Yeah. Oh, I really like Lara bars too.
Yep.
For those tend to set pretty well for me. I had a client once that had a horrible experience because she was like, oh, these Lara bars, they're really high in calories. So she was just looking at calories, And that's all she feels. She just packed a bunch of Lara bars on her like 50-mile race, and then that did not.
Oh no!
Well, so don't go overboard on any fuel, really.
Yeah, because they also have quite a bit of fat, right?
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And fiber. Fun times.
Yeah.
That probably was not a great experience. All right.
No.
And speaking of fat, what about fat? How do you educate clients surrounding fat when it comes to building an ultra nutrition plan?
So in an effort to keep things fairly simplistic, it's not one that I tend to say like get X amount of grams per hour.
Yeah, same.
If anything, I'm telling people to be mindful of, like, so for example, a Spring Energy Wolf Pack is a pretty common energy source, at least amongst with some clients. I don't know, maybe in different areas, maybe not.
No, same.
Their Wolf Pack used to be 350 calories and I think close to 18 grams of fat. Now I think it's 14 grams of fat in a Wolf Pack. So, and I'd be curious what you say, Claire, because what the number that I tell people to look out for is about 10 grams of fat in a product. And if it's around that range, then that's when I'm going to start to encourage them to not consume it over just the course of 1 hour. I'm going to encourage them to consume it over a longer period of time. Eat half of it and then eat the other half an hour or two later. But that's my approach. I'm curious what you tell your clients.
Yeah, I also don't really give a specific amount. And there is no guideline on fat also, by the way. So it's not one of those things where, like carbs, like you have to get this amount per hour. I think that the longer you're going, then the more there is a need for a real food for most people who are out there, and especially people who are out there for a long time who are slower and not professional athletes. And, we also think about the number of meals and snacks that you've missed, right? And that's also just another reason for protein, right? So like all of those meals and snacks that you're missing versus, hey, I'm running, for a few hours, it's not as big of a deal. So when it comes to fat, I think it's one of those things that comes down to individual tolerance, what you've practiced. And same, like, I think I don't actually give a certain amount, but now that you mention it, that's a great thing to say. Like 10 grams, I think is a very reasonable amount, but some people may not even tolerate that. That might be a lot for some people, right? And I know because we've been talking about the Spring Energy products, I love their products, but I'm actually not a huge fan of the Speed Nut personally. It's just way too much for me. And I don't like the taste, but also it's just like way too much fat. And it doesn't really help with the carbs. So I think when it comes to fat, it's like sometimes people are having like PB&Js, or they're including like the fat naturally through nuts or nut butters, whether it's in a Lara bar or in a nut butter pack or whatever it may be. So I feel like fat just kind of finds its way in, and as long as you're not overdoing it and you practice with it, that's one of those things I'm not being like really specific on. Now, if someone's like sitting there like obviously like spooning nut butter, I'd be like, dude, like don't do that. But most people kind of know for the most part that that's not going to be great. Although you think about things like whether it's like bacon or people are having like avocado, I don't even know. Like, again, there's just some people who are always, some people are always going to be able to tolerate stuff, and people just have different sensitivities and tolerances. And that's, again, this is why it all comes down to an individualized plan and kind of knowing also what you can and cannot tolerate. And sometimes you learn the hard way. That's kind of my approach to fat. But
it's funny that I always chuckle a little bit, like bacon and avocado are like almost put on this like pedestal, I feel like, in the ultra running world. And I feel like maybe I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. But like sometimes when I hear like a newer ultra runner or somebody say that they tried the bacon or the avocado for the first time during a race because they were so excited, and then all of a sudden, like later, they were like, "Oh, that wasn't a good idea." I would be like, "Yes, we need more of that. Like, we need to know that it's not this like pedestal food." But like I think like a piece of bacon sounds fantastic, like especially late in the middle of the night during 100-miler or whatever. But just please don't go. Like my advice would be probably don't go overboard on it for majority of people.
Or maybe like try it in training and see how that goes.
Yeah. Yes.
We're like doing that for the first time. But yeah, no, I hear you. Even something like a quesadilla, like I have a more of a sensitive stomach, like, and also, by the way, just for the record, like I have not done anything long. I work with ultrarunners who've done the really long stuff, and it sounds like you've done super long stuff. But I've not done anything over 50 miles. I want to at some point. I'm not there yet. But I will get back to it. What distances do you run?
Yeah, no, we should get this clear. No, I've just run 50 miles.
Okay, cool.
I have a lot more experience with 55Ks and just like long days in the mountains, like
Yes.
10, 12 hour plus days in the mountains. And then my husband is actually, so my husband's run 4 100s, and I've paced him for
Nice.
typically about 30 miles of those during, and it's typically in the middle of the night and when I get to hop in there. So I feel like I have some lived experience with being on those situations. And then I've obviously helped a lot of people run 100 miles. It just hasn't happened for me just with childbirth and trying to have a second kid and all that. But
same.
It's a goal of mine. Yeah. It's a goal of mine for next year, actually.
Oh, so that's exciting.
Yeah.
I don't know if I actually don't think I want to run 100 miles. I'm just gonna put that out there. I also have this fear of running in the dark, like, and I know that kind of sounds ridiculous, but I don't know. You live in a much more nature centric place. I mean, I say that, of course, I now live in Santa Cruz and there are just animals everywhere, but it's a little different than living near glaciers. But something about running in the middle of the night really freaks the shit out of me. So maybe at some point I'll get there. For now, I'm thinking 50 miles and maybe 100K. That's where my last 50K left me, like kind of being like, maybe I'll do that. We'll see. I'm like, I can kind of finish where it's like starting to get dark, maybe. So we'll see. Okay, so let's move on to fluid.
Running in the dark.
Yeah. I'm glad I'm not the only one.
It's a fear of mine as well.
Okay, I'm glad I'm not the only one.
No, if I'm with people, then it's totally fine. But yeah, it's something that I don't want to do really by myself. So yeah, I would totally be that person running 100 milers that's saying like, I definitely need a pacer when I hit like 9 p.m. at night. You have to be here with me.
Exactly. If I were with someone else, if I were with someone else, I think it'd be fine. But it's like, I mean, you know how it is in these races. Like you're sometimes like all by yourself. So like the idea of being completely alone
for a long time
all night, I would die. Like I can't. Not right now. At least not right now. All right, let's move on to fluid electrolytes. Obviously, these are so crucial, especially for the longer races. And so many things go wrong here because the hydration plan wasn't dialed in and people didn't think about it. And again, where the vomit often comes in or people just feeling sick. So let's chat about kind of identifying those fluid and sodium needs and how to work this into the overall nutrition plan. I know you said like you start off by being like, hey, what's your baseline for both, for sodium, for fluid, right? How are you working on identifying kind of the fluid and sodium targets? Are you kind of using specific testing, whether it's like kind of, your home weighing yourself kind of sweat test or any other like sodium tests, or how are you kind of working on that?
Yeah, I think I could probably get more scientific with this with my clients. I meet them wherever they're at. So if I have somebody that does a sweat test, then we go off of that. I have encouraged some clients who suspect that they are sweaty, heavy, salty sweaters to invest in an H drop, or I think it's NIX.
NIX, yeah.
That right? And then, or doing like a precision hydration test. And those clients that do that tend to be very heavy sweaters. And then we use that information then to replace their sodium and their fluid needs. If somebody seems to be doing okay, then I tend to like to make sure that they're somewhere in the range of like replacing their sodium, give or take 500 milligrams of sodium an hour, a couple hundred milligrams on each end of that. And if they're doing fine with that, then I leave it be. and just make sure that they're replacing that at that rate. And then, of course, if it's a hot weekend, then we bump that up some. I'm curious if I would love to hear like how you make adjustments to that for people too. Like recently I had a client ask like, how much should I increase my sodium and my fluid intake? Because she's racing Tahoe this weekend and she's like, the temperature is going to be, 100 degrees. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, well, we could, increase it by maybe 100 or 200 milligrams of sodium more per hour. But and then she wanted to increase it even more because then the projected temperature got even hotter. And I was like, well, why don't you let's just keep extra on hand, like keep some like salt capsules on hand. And then if you feel like you need them, you can go from there. But also just like educating people that like, if they start peeing frequently on the trail, that could likely mean that they need more sodium, not less. So things like that, but that's how I work with clients.
Yeah.
But I find hydration and sodium a little tricky.
It is tricky, and it's something I've been trying to like educate myself more and more on. And I still sometimes get confused on kind of how to pinpoint it.
There's different theories out there too, is like what I've found. Like there's like contradicting theories on how to hydrate during ultra marathons. So it's just like, how do I navigate this?
I love that you're having a snack, by the way. I don't know. This is like, I can see you and no one else can see you, but like, dietitians talking, like obviously we're having a snack while podcasting. I love it.
I'm actively carb loading.
Yeah, there you go. So in terms of all that, well, one thing, Tahoe, I heard that there's a really, really, really long stretch between aid stations. One of my friends was telling me about this, and so that, and then it's at elevation and it's hot temperatures, and that to me just sounds really, really rough. I did canyons, and there were some even just like I think it was like 7 or 8 mile stretches without water or anything, and it was like 90 some degrees, and that sucked. So a lot of people ran out of water who were prepared. But yeah, in terms of like testing, I always, again, like you, finding out what the baseline is. I encourage a sweat test if someone has access to a scale and doesn't feel like that's going to like trigger them or send them down some spiraling things. If we can identify that through sweat testing, that's great. If a precision test is available, I really like that test a lot. I actually really don't have any experience with H-drop or NICS. I was actually scheduled to talk with another dietitian, Colette, the Scratch Labs dietitian. I don't know if you know her, but she, so we're actually going to be talking all about wearables and all the different kind of products out there. And I know that Kylie's also actively testing different hydration things and comparing them. Yeah. Levelin is one I've had really, really mixed experiences with, and I've actually gotten some really weird results from clients with them that didn't seem accurate. And Levelin.
Oh, I haven't heard of that one.
It's one of those sweat patch ones. Okay. I know some dietitians use it and find it's great. I personally have not had the best experience with it. So Precision's the one I recommend if it's available. It's just not available all over, unfortunately. So like, for instance, my client I'm working on who's doing Bigfoot is nowhere close to a Precision center. So we did a Levelin test. It was like really weird results. He bought a NICS. And it's like, okay, well, we're going to take these two things, and it's like, how do we find, like, so we're just going to pick somewhere in the middle and play around with it. But it's like, there's only so much you can do. The trouble is, and I've run into this with other people, it's like training goes great. We think we're kind of hitting it. And then race day comes, they're running their race pace. And, again, like you're not running 100 miles in your training at race pace or whatever. Right. So it's like, that's where they run into issues. And so, it can be really frustrating, especially as a dietitian, feeling like you failed them. And I mean, I'm sure you've had experiences where it's like, you want to get the race report. You're like, I nailed everything. I did it. I did great, blah, blah. And instead it's like, I vomited everywhere and had to DNF. You're like, fuck. Yeah. So, hopefully I'm not the only one where that's happened, but,
no, definitely not.
Yeah. So, I think the hydration piece is really, it's a tricky one, and obviously, and it's like a moving target because, as you said, we have these kinds of like average amounts, right? And we have a lot of products on the market, like all kinds of different products, but a lot of these products that are kind of geared towards that kind of more average amount. And we have these general recommendations. And so in the absence of like knowing whether or not a person is a heavy, salty sweater, let's say, and we don't know, and let's say there is an issue, because if someone's, like, as you said, they're doing okay, and they're doing whatever, then most likely they're not a heavy, salty sweater, because if they were, they wouldn't be doing okay, right? Like most likely. Yeah. So often we get these people who are like really not doing okay, and they're probably outliers of some kind, and we're trying to find it, and it's just be so hard. But yeah, so the sodium piece, like for my personally, like if we have access to tests, great, we use it. If not, then maybe we're going based on the feedback the client's giving me, maybe we're going a little bit higher and then just playing around with it. But again, like you kind of don't know until race day how it's all going to play out sometimes. And that's the hard part.
Well, and the other big piece for me too, Claire, and I don't know if you experienced this as well, is like knowing, all right, so do we aim to replace 100% of this sodium, or do we like aim to replace 50% of this, sodium that's being sweat out? Like, because for some, I've had clients that have those tests come back at like 1,800 milligrams of sodium per hour that they're sweating out. And it's like, I don't know how I physically could get you to consume that much hour upon hour.
Yeah. My understanding is that we do want to replace 100% of the sodium lost. We don't want to replace 100% of the fluid lost. And that's the fluid piece is sometimes tricky, because I'll get people, and my listeners are like, why are we listening to this discussion of two dietitians talking? Well, because you're hearing what's going on behind the scenes, okay? But also, so people know that when they have these things happen, they're not alone, right? So this is a little bit of a different type of interview. But in terms of the sodium piece, there are people who are really, really high. With fluid, for instance, I'll have these people who are losing like multiple pounds an hour. It's just crazy. Like, we're not going to have you drink 2 liters an hour. It's not going to happen, but let's at least get you to more than a liter if we can. So I think it depends on the situation. And my understanding with fluid is, yes, you're replacing a percentage of that. And maybe that's also a situation where it's like, hey, let's go to those fresh fruits. Like, let's get some water elsewhere. Let's have some watermelon or whatever, right? And then with the sodium piece, we are trying to get close to that. And that's where it becomes tricky. And that's where you get those products like, okay, 1,800, scratch hyperhydration, 1,720 milligrams. Boom. Let's do that. So that's where it's like matching to the product. And then that particular product, it doesn't really have many carbs. So again, that can sometimes guide what the plan is, at least I kind of sometimes use what the fluid and sodium targets are to kind of guide us in what types of other products to use. Because if someone isn't a salty sweater, something like normal scratch and tailwind and those things might be great and adequate. But then if you need more, then it's like maybe something like the Precision 1,500 or something else, might be better, right? At least that's how I handle it. But it's hard. I'm with you. It's something I'm still trying to figure out how to do correctly.
Yeah. No, that's super helpful to hear how you do it, and gives good perspective as well.
Yeah. All right. I think we already talked a little bit about fueling long training runs versus the shorter ones. And I think the takeaway there, because that was originally one of my next questions, I really think the takeaway is, and this is what I gather you've been recommending, is that really using shorter runs as a chance to train your gut. And it's also a critical part of meeting overall energy demands, which we know, of course, as ultrarunners, you have much higher energy demands. And then really, I just wanted to restate this because I think a lot of runners see, it's only a 1 to 2 hour run. That's no big deal, especially again, ultrarunners, where it's like, that's a short run. But not forgetting like, hey, you still need to fuel those adequately. And if nothing else, even if it's not for the train the gut part, this is an eating opportunity. Let's get some fuel in to make sure you're not going to be under fueled overall when it comes to the end of the day. Do you have anything kind of to add to that?
Oh, I think you covered it. Yeah. I think fueling the shorter runs and then even prioritizing recovery after the shorter runs is another thing that I talk about with clients as well. Like, no, it's not required, but you're probably going to notice a benefit to doing it later in the day if you do. So there's a lot of energy expenditure and needs as an ultra runner, and being okay and changing that mindset to that food is going to be a beneficial and helpful thing for your body and your mental health as well. And just to really work on, that relationship with food and your thought processes over how food can serve you in different times and periods of your life. So, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So now let's go to GI issues. That's the big one, of course, especially with longer races. And I know you talk about that a lot with your clients. There are so many reasons why GI issues occur. And we've kind of touched upon GI stuff here and there already. But yeah, when you get a client who's like throwing up or having other GI issues in ultras, and especially like the really long ones, what are your go-to questions for them? And how are you working on these issues, especially when, as I mentioned earlier, when you can't actually practice running, say 100-miler, except on the day. So it's like you're working on all these things, and how can you build, at least with some confidence, a plan that you think is going to work for them?
Oh, yeah. So a lot of it's getting a baseline of how they are fueling. And if they are under fueling, then having that discussion of, okay, if we work you up to 60 grams of carb an hour, maybe even more than that, then you just need to trust me that this is going to help you, like 80 miles into your 100-miler, not to feel sick. Or, I do also prep people that it is very normal to, at some point in time, hit during a 50-miler or longer, a section of time where you just don't want to eat. That is like something that you should just be prepared for, and it's normal, and know that, and have something that you can fall back on during that time. So like, this is where liquid nutrition can come in really handy, where you can drink something rather than have to, because people get sick and tired of chewing.
Yeah.
And that eating something is going to make it feel better. So, and help you get through that period of time where you don't want to eat. So accepting that there's some normalcy to that, at least. But also just like education on being well fueled early on in your race is going to decrease the risk of GI issues later. Being well hydrated, keeping on top of your sodium needs, that is also going to decrease your risk of getting sick later. And then a third thing that I do, and then also variety of foods. So a lot of things we've already talked about here, especially the longer that you're going, because food habituation is real, right? We get sick and tired of eating the same exact food. You hear people say like, oh, I'd like never wanted another sip of Tailwind at the end of the ultra. Like, yeah, that's food habituation. That's because your body was just like, this doesn't taste good anymore. And so getting a variety of food is going to help that. And then there's things that I have people do on shorter runs. So if they're running hill repeats or doing any kind of speed workout, I said it's not going to be comfortable for you to fuel during them, but I want you to practice eating when your heart rate is high, when you are feeling uncomfortable, when you don't feel like you want to eat. These are situations in which are going to help. They're maybe not exactly the same of what you're going to run into during your ultra, but it is a situation in which you're not feeling like you want to eat. You maybe feel a little bit sick to your stomach because you're working at a higher intensity, but it gives your body and you mentally a practice eating something. So I remember I had one client just come back and he's like, my heart rate was all over the place. I couldn't keep up with my friends because he does like these speed intervals with his buddies. And then he was like, and then they were kind of making fun of me for eating during the run. And I was like, yeah, it's maybe just prep people like, hey, my dietitian that I'm working with told me that I have to do this. So please don't judge me today. I'm going to be eating. But it's doing things like this that I've found have really helped people get used to eating when they're uncomfortable. We don't run ultras to feel comfortable. Like a lot of us are doing them because we like the discomfort and pushing ourselves beyond, normal limits. And so this is just one other way to where you can prep yourself to fueling when you feel uncomfortable, and hopefully help you ultimately avoid getting those GI issues. So these are all, I guess, these are all talking points on how to potentially prolong or avoid the GI issues. So that's my suggestions there.
I love that idea. That's a great idea.
Yeah, good. Yeah. Feel free to take it and tell your clients to do it as well. Try it out yourself. I was just telling my clients today on my group call with them that I was eating an awesome sauce on like a 2-mile uphill. It's nothing crazy. It's like 700 feet of climbing over the course of about 2 miles. And I was just like, all right, I'm going to push my pace and eat an awesome sauce and drink some scratch and during this. And then, I like obviously didn't enjoy it, but I did it. And then at the top, then I just had like this gross burp, like this, like, like those acidy burps that you get that aren't like quite puke, but they're just like, it's like, yeah, this is good. This is a good reminder, Julie, that this like is not a comfortable thing to do, but it's a good practice for me to do this, and also more relatable to people too when you have experiences like that.
Yeah, totally. And is that kind of like we were talking earlier about intensity and being able to tolerate things with intensity, and that's, I'm assuming, one of the strategies you're recommending.
Yep. And it's totally anecdotal. It's just something that I encourage people to try. And with my client base, they tend to see pretty decent benefits when they start to do these things. So,
and over how much time are you? I mean, I know it varies based on when people are coming to you, but how much time do you think it takes to kind of be practicing something like that and see benefits?
Yeah, I'm sure you've probably seen some train your gut research that suggests that you can train your gut in I think it's 2 weeks or so, from the ones that I've read. There's not a whole lot of things that I've come by on ultra running.
Oh yeah, not on research. I mean, maybe it's more anecdotally. I meant,
yeah. Just so I'm putting that out there, I think it ranges for people on how sensitive they are and where they're starting with. But I do feel like some people can see pretty big benefits within a month of actually putting a lot of this ideas and actually executing it during their training block. And of course, it also depends on where they are in their training block. If they're more sensitive to something, then it might take 2 or 3 months. And that's the length of time that I'm typically working with people is 12 weeks. That's how long my program lasts. And sometimes people work with me longer. I've had a couple of clients work with me for over a year. And they've seen huge improvements just with that. So it all depends on where the person is coming from, what their baseline is. So I think my answer there is that it just varies pretty greatly.
Yeah. And let's say someone is running, 100-miler or something longer or whatever it is, and they hit that low patch and they are getting sick. What are you recommending that they do from there?
Yeah. So hopefully, if they have hit a low patch and they are let's say they're nauseated, maybe they are or are not throwing up, this is where I say really slow down your intensity, right? Come to a walk or sit down on a rock if you need to. Slow it down and really take a self-assessment. And hopefully if you've been working with somebody like Claire or myself, that you can actually look back and do an accurate self-assessment. Okay, when was the last time I ate? How much sodium have I been taking in? Have I only been eating one type of food? And let that possibly tell you maybe something to correct. That might be more difficult to do if you wing your nutrition and you're not really paying attention to things. But if you do have, some kind of knowledge or structure there, hopefully you can look back and see. Maybe it's anxiety too. That's another thing that I've seen throw people for a loop. I had a client who finished a very difficult 100-miler. The dropout rate was very high. She was one of, I think, 5 or 6 females to actually finish it. And in the middle of the race, she said her fueling was going great. Like she felt great, but a thunderstorm rolled in. She was at a higher elevation, and she said, I threw up, and she said it wasn't because of, I don't think it was because of fueling. It was just because it was like a very nerve-wracking situation. There was a big fluctuation in temperature as well. And so also, so having tools in your toolbox as well to manage anxiety, because we do know that gut-brain connection can really.
I was about to say gut-brain axis.
Yes. So at least for me, the main tool in my toolbox for that is diaphragmatic breathing. And so we talk about how to do that and slow down your digestive system and slow down your heart rate. And I'm sure there's like terms that I'm not saying that go along with this, but really working on managing that whole system too. So yeah, just acknowledging that there's other things outside of fueling that can cause GI or upset or
yeah.
And then when it comes to like pooping, I always say, like, if you're going to be running 100 miles or even like 50 miles, expecting one poop might not actually be, out of the range of normal. Like, just
totally.
If you're just pooping one time or maybe twice for 100-miler, like, check the box and say that's good. But if you are getting stuck and having to poop on the side of the trail constantly, then we have some issues. And hopefully this is an issue that's happening on training runs. At least that's the theme that I tend to see in my clients. The people that have the pooping issues tend to have it on their long runs. And so it could be a chronic underfueling issue. It could be the maybe goos with electrolytes, and maybe we need to flush that down with water. It could be maybe they're just not regular poopers on a daily basis, and so then I really try and work with them, like how can we get you regular? So I know I diverged from that question a little bit, but it just came to my mind. So
no, this is great. That's awesome information. And we'll just close out the performance nutrition discussion with other considerations. So I know you're in the mountains, a lot of high altitude stuff going on there, extreme conditions. We've kind of covered those things. The really long races, so like 200 milers and all that, stage races. I mean, is there, and we don't have time to cover all of those things, but is there anything that you would like to point out with these kind of other things that would affect nutrition planning that you encounter frequently in your practice?
Yeah, with the stage, I have clients often do like stage races in preparation for 200s. That's what I found. So they'll practice, we'll really try and dial in like their recovery meal when they get done, and practice or plan out what they want to have ready for them. I don't have there is like a fun little calculation out there that I've found for recovery meals for stage races. I don't have it memorized, so I can't just like rattle it off.
No, you're good. You're good.
But sometimes incorporating some caffeine in there can help them reabsorb their the glycogen stores better, like faster and more efficient. So sometimes we practice doing that. Oh yeah, caffeine is a whole nother strategy we didn't even talk about.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Which is totally fine. We can have another discussion at another time, or we can go long. But for 200-mile races or stage races, it's like for 200-mile races, I encourage just get a meal and actually get a sub sandwich in, or get like pancakes and waffles and syrup, and get some actual like meal food in there, because you're out there for a long time, and just to be pounding down these hourly snacks isn't probably going to go well for that long of a race. You can get by on doing that for 100-mile or 24 to 36 hours, but if you're going longer than that, then I would tend to encourage a meal in there somewhere that you are going to plan for. So that's my basic advice for stage racing and 200s.
What about high altitude? Are you making any separate recommendations for that there?
Just increased sodium and increased carbs. So if they know that their race is at altitude, then that's the main advice. So that would be even training your gut on your training runs, even at lower altitude, to be able to tolerate. So like maybe you do really well with 60 grams, then let's try and up it to like 70 or 80 or even 90 grams per hour. And same with the sodium. That it's like per our conversation before, it's so tricky because then that one you can't really like, I don't want to have them practice
exactly
supplementing their sodium on training runs if they don't actually need it, but just having that knowledge of knowing that they need more and a plan to how to get more on race day. So I guess would be the difference there.
Yeah. And I'm going to scrap the everyday nutrition stuff and I'm going to talk about caffeine instead, because I think that's, let's just make this all performance fueling discussion here. Cause not like we can cover everyday nutrition in 13 minutes anyways. So let's talk caffeine. I know it's too much. I always want to talk about too much. It's my problem. Caffeine. Yeah. Let's talk about how we can use caffeine in ultras, and maybe we can talk about in different distances. So how you might use it in like a 50 miler versus say 100 miler.
Yeah. So for races that are just going to happen during the day, I just say caffeine is really up to the person, whether or not they want to incorporate it. Maybe they've tried it on a training run and they really do think that it, decreases the perceived exertion level. So it makes it feel easier for them. So then I might encourage them to have some kind of caffeinated chew or gel or beverage. Maybe, science says like an hour before you hit a climb, but I personally feel like I feel caffeine maybe 5 to 15 minutes after I have it. So I don't always buy into that recommendation, but I tell people to try out when they, when they start to feel it, and then try and time out before a big climb, when they want to have their caffeine. So that's not answering your question. That's something under 50. So if they're going for 50 or 100K or 100 miler, and because I have a client now that's going to run a 50 miler, and her estimated time to finish is 20 hours. She's a back of the packer, and that's a long time on your feet for going 50 miles. So for her, caffeine intake is part of the strategy. So it, once again, it goes back to how long is the whatever race going to take you.
Yeah.
So, so if you do have a race that's going to take you into the night, or throughout the whole night, then this is where I do recommend getting a little bit more strategic with your caffeine. So there's a couple different approaches, and one would be little tiny, maybe 25 to 50 milligrams of caffeine every 2-ish hours throughout the evening into the night, into the early morning. So you could just give yourself little tiny doses. Or you might be somebody that's no, I do really well in the early part of the evening, but when 3 a.m. hits, I get a drag right there. And that's when I just want to pound a Red Bull and then have, an energy chew with caffeine and have a bigger bolus of caffeine to help you get through that early morning section. So there's a couple different approaches, and it's just, I try and talk to people. One, are you okay with feeling with caffeine? Does it work with your body? I know there's, certain religious beliefs that disagree with caffeine. So we have that discussion. If they are pro caffeine, then how do you use caffeine currently? And how do you foresee caffeine working for you on race day? I know it's a little bit of a mixed recommendation out there about practicing night running, but I tend to encourage people, especially if you've never run overnight before, to try and do at least an evening run into the evening, if not a night race, or just get a couple buddies and go for 20-mile run starting at midnight. If you have good friends, you'll find them. They'll do it for you. But I know I've heard from some run coaches that actually don't suggest doing this because the recovery process is so hard on the body. So I get that as well. But to the fueling point, this gives us a really great opportunity to practice what it feels like eating in the middle of the night. It's not natural for your body to be doing this. So getting any kind of practice, in my opinion, is better. So, so yeah, those are kind of the main different ways I encourage people to go about it.
Awesome. Thank you. I think that's really important to include there. And so you're training for, what's the race again this weekend?
I'm doing
Beaverhead.
Yeah, Beaverhead 50. I'm just doing 55Ks are really, they don't scare me the distance wise. And so anyway, so yes, I'm doing Beaverhead 55K. And then about a month ago, I ran Old Gabe 50. They say it's a 50K, but it's like just shy of 35 miles. So it's a 55K. But
yeah, awesome.
So it felt really fun to get back racing. So yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I never see 55Ks out here, at least. Right now, we're like at the point with our kids that like my parents will watch them for like a night, and we can do like, and sometimes what we'll do is we'll just like leave really early and drive a few hours to a thing and then come right back. So nice. I would love to do like further afield travel to races. So right now it's just whatever's local in California. So, but yeah, I haven't seen 55Ks, only 50Ks. But
yeah, it's funny. Yeah, this summer I'm doing 2 55Ks. Yeah, because Beaverhead is like specifically, they say it's a 55K. And then Old Gabe, they just say it's like Old Gabe is like this long-standing race near Bozeman, Montana. And they say the first aid station's at 9 miles, but it's actually at like 10. And then they say that the second aid station's at like 16 or 17 miles, but it's actually almost 19 miles. And then so if you're not used to like, if you're like a roadie come into an ultra race, then like this really throws people off. They don't like it.
Yeah. Wait, is that intentional? Like they're trying to like trick people, or is it like a joke, or is it like they're just very casual? They describe it.
Yeah, I just think it's just like a casual. Yeah, this is a 50K. It's
like no big deal.
Around like to 5 miles around. Like it's just.
That's funny.
So yeah, it was a fun race. That race had like just shy of 11,000 feet of climbing. It was a lot of climbing.
11,000 feet. Oh my God.
Yeah.
And here I was like whining about 7,000 in my last 15.
Oh no, 7 is no joke. Jeez.
11,000 is nuts. Yeah, that was the Mount Tam 50K here, which was beautiful. But all right, we'll wrap things up real fast, and I promise I'll let you go on time. What is your favorite pre-run meal or snack?
My favorite pre-run meal. So I'm weird. I like to eat eggs before I go run. And I know this is like not like like what you should recommend, but I can tolerate it. So I like eggs and like one egg, I like toast and like one egg. So not a lot of, eggs, but I really like the way my body feels when I have some protein. So that's typically what I have either before long runs or on race day.
But that's actually a great thing to eat. And I would recommend that if someone you can tolerate it, because you're usually wanting to get like 8 to 10 grams of protein in anyways. And you get maybe you're getting a little bit more than that with the bread and everything, but as long as you get your carbs in, you're good. That's great.
Yeah.
And what about after a run? What's your favorite kind of go-to meal or snack?
Yeah, I like fresh things. So if I can get my hands on like a Jimmy John's sandwich, I really like those, or a smoothie I really like, or I like stir fries too. So yeah.
Awesome.
Those kind of meals.
What is the most interesting food you've ever tried?
Oh yes, I heard you ask this to somebody else when I was listening to your podcast, and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to say to that.
It's okay if you don't know.
I'm sure I've had something probably slightly more exotic, but I had quail eggs one time in Nicaragua, I think is where I ate those. And I don't think those are like really out of, the box, but.
Did they taste different than normal eggs, do you think? Or chicken eggs, I guess you would say.
I don't think so.
No, same.
I think they were, from what I remember, I think the shell was like blue, and I think they were smaller, but, yeah, I'm sure I have a better answer than that if I were to really
it's all good.
down into my memories. But sorry, that's
no worries.
That's what's coming.
How do you like your eggs cooked, since we're talking about eggs?
Oh yeah, I like them scrambled. Mm-hmm.
Nice. What's your favorite beverage? Alcoholic or non-alcoholic?
I actually really love plain water, so I will say that. And then I do in the summertime, I love a good like pale ale. I really like the taste of beer, and but yeah, pale ale in the summertime on like a hot day is one of my favorite things.
Does it get really hot in Montana?
I mean, if people in the South heard me say yes, they would probably scoff at me. So, I mean, it gets in the 80s now. Like today, it's like upper 80s, like almost. Okay,
that's
90s.
hot. That's hot. All right, that's very hot. I'm in Northern California. I'm like, that's so hot.
Okay.
It's like I'm on the water. I'm like, it's like 70. It feels hot here. Yeah. No. Okay. And what are your comfort foods?
Yeah, I love pizza. We make like homemade pizza pretty much on like a weekly basis, sometimes more frequently than that. I love pizza, and I really like chocolate milk too. I don't drink it all that often. I have like a lactose intolerance, but when I can get like a lactose-free chocolate milk, I think it tastes really good.
Yeah. What's your favorite? Well, I guess ice cream flavor, so maybe it's just a dessert if you don't do ice cream because you're lactose intolerant.
Oh, I love ice cream so much, and it's been such a bummer just to be, like make that realization, like, oh man, when I eat ice cream, it's really not a good choice, Julie. Like, we need to go somewhere else. But they have some really good, in my opinion, coconut milk ice cream. And I'm forgetting it might be like coconut bliss or something. I don't know what the name of it is, but they have a chocolate chip cookie dough one that I just find delightful. So that will be my answer.
Have you had Van Leeuwen before? Their vegan ice cream?
Oh, what's that?
It's really good. They have like shops in New York, but I saw them actually. They carry at the grocery store in California. So, but they have like some vegan ones. They're really yummy. So just another option.
Yeah.
And last question, top 3 items of gear that are most essential to your active lifestyle.
Oh, yes. So clearly my running shoes, my trail running shoes. I have rotated through so many different kinds. So I can't even tell you which specific kind, but a trail running shoe. Because I'm still on the outlook for like the perfect running shoe with the best tread that doesn't give me, blisters, that kind of thing, with like a 4mm drop. Anywho, so trail running shoe, running pack, clearly for all my snacks, and my flasks. And then, for the summertime, I just invested in a pair of like Smith, like full face sunglasses. I think they're like the Bobcat ones, I think is what it's called.
Nice.
And I'm like so in love with them. I joke with my friends that like I wear them like as my daily sunglasses. So like I'm like driving around town like with my minivan, just like in these obnoxious sunglasses. But I've like really, really loved them because they're amazing sunglasses and they don't move. I have a very small head, so I really struggle finding sunglasses that stay on. So yeah, currently I'm in love with
awesome.
those.
I'll have to check those out. I haven't heard of that company. I shall investigate. Yeah.
Smith sunglasses?
Yeah, I don't know those.
Oh, okay. I'm sure you've seen people wear Smiths.
I'm sure. Yeah. Are they like those like really big ones that are like kind of metallic looking? They almost look like 80s like?
Yes.
Like neon.
They're like so obnoxious.
But they're like reminiscent of like the 80s or something, basically. Right. Like, I've seen those and I think like 80s like skiing or something. Like that's what like comes to mind. Okay, then I have seen them. Awesome. Yes. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Julie. And where can everyone find you and get more information on working with you if they want to?
Oh, yeah. Thanks for asking that question. So Instagram is the best platform to get a hold of me on. My handle is at ultra.running.nutrition. And I currently have a 12-week program where I help people dial in their fueling for ultra marathons and feel really confident in fueling for race day. And my clients see like awesome results on race day. And so if you're interested in learning about that program, you can either send me a message on Instagram or you can click the link in my bio and there's an application there that has a little video that you can watch and you can learn more details about the program. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Julie. This was so much fun getting to know you and chatting all things ultra running nutrition. And have an amazing time this weekend at your race.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you so much for asking me on as a guest. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
And that's our show for today. Thanks again, Julie, for chatting with me. And you guys, if you have any follow-up questions for either one of us, you can reach out to me on Instagram, Eat for Endurance. You can reach out to Julie at the handle she provided. And of course, you can always email me with any feedback whatsoever, or questions, or podcast topic requests, or anything at claire@eatforendurance.com. claire@eatforendurance.com. I paused because I'm still transitioning from my other email, which is eatforendurance@gmail.com, which I am still checking, by the way. So if you do email that one, no worries at all. And of course, as I said in the middle of the show, please, please, please help me grow this show, help me support it, spread the news, subscribe, all that good stuff, wherever you listen. It's really, really appreciated. I do want to keep this going, but it is taking lots and lots of time away from client time, and I need to make sure I can keep this going, and I really want to. So thank you again. I'll see you all next time.